Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending our December event. This is hosted by Virginia Women in HPC, where our goal is to support the inclusion of women and minorities in the high performance computing world. Today, our topic is Two Women's Journeys to Cybersecurity. My name is Nicole Brandscheitel. I'm a computational scientist with ARC at Virginia Tech, and I'm super excited to introduce our panelists for today. So sorry if I say your name is wrong, but we have Amy Starzinski-Coddins, who is the Vice President of Training Services at Ascend Cyber. And then we also have Laura Raderman, who is the ISO Policy and Compliance Coordinator at Carnegie Mellon. Kind of the format for today, I'll give each of the panelists some time to kind of just talk about their career journeys in cybersecurity and kind of anything else they want to talk about. And then we'll open up the floor for any Q&A. I have some prepared questions, but also feel free to unmute yourselves or type the questions in the chat as they come up. So with that, I'll give the floor over. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'll give the floor over to Amy to start.
All right, good afternoon. I don't have anything interesting or fun to share this afternoon. Unfortunately, this morning turned out to be a little crazier than I anticipated, uh, which can happen, obviously. But very happy to be here to talk to you all and to let you know how I ended up here, which is really weird. Uh, you know, there's a lot of the times that I'm like, how the hell did I end up here and what am I doing right now? Um, I started in undergrad. I got my bachelor's in public health education. Um, it was something that I didn't even know I was going to get I started with psychology, and then I was like, oh, this sucks. I'm not going to do this anymore. It's kind of hard. And I kind of like went and did different stuff and ended up going to grad school to get my master's in education. My first master's is in English for grades 5 through 12, which is how Indiana does it. I went to IU, Indiana University, which you should all be familiar with after what's happened with the football team. For God's sake, you can't go anywhere without hearing about it. But went to IU, grew up in Indiana, got that bachelor's in public health, and then was like, I want to follow bands in the summer. This is my calling, really. I want to have summers off so that I can follow bands. So decided that's what I was going to do. And I was going to go to grad school because I wasn't really ready to grow up. You guys are going to be like, how did they find this woman by the end? Or right now. I don't know how they found me either. Um, Not following bands anymore. But decided that, I was going to teach. So went to school to do, you know, grades 5 through 12 for English because that was the fastest way and I really like to read. And then while I was doing that and doing my student teaching, I found that I meshed really well with the exceptional learners, the kids who had disabilities. Loved it. And what I loved was working with the kids that everybody thought couldn't do it and working with the kids who also thought they couldn't do it. And I liked helping them and I liked showing them that they could. And so what happened was I wasn't even going to teach. I was like, I don't want to do this full time either. This kind of sucks. And so I ended up getting a job at a publisher and hated that too. There's a theme here, I guess. But then found a job teaching at a very low income, underserved school on the west side of Indianapolis, and it was for special ed. Took that job. It was a little rough. Like, I got hit a couple of times. That's like weird. You're like, you never think you're gonna like go into, your first teaching job or your first like grown up job really and get hit. Um, but I did, and I did not press charges. I was like, I just want to work it out with the kids. But did that, but also went to school to get my second master's degree, which was in special education with mild interventions. And I loved it. And it went back to, I loved working with the kids and giving them high expectations to strive for. I loved that. I loved showing them that they could do it. I loved showing other people that they could do it. There's just ways to reframe. There's always a way to reframe. And sometimes you just need to kind of change stuff to help people understand. You know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. This comes up later, I promise. So during that time, I was like, I still don't really want to teach. You know, I got another job teaching like at a country school where they definitely like did not think anybody could learn anything. But I was like, I'm going to get my PhD. So I'm still at IU during all of this. Um, you know, working on finishing the second master's degree. And I'm like, doing research at the time, loving that, absolutely loving research. Um, I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to apply for my PhD. Totally going to do, you know, I want to do counseling as my minor. My dad's a psychologist that, you know, resonated with me. And I got pregnant. And so I was like, shit. Um, but I was like, how am I going to do this? And I, you know, took a little bit of time off afterwards. Um, and then I ended up working for the government. I worked for the state and I worked for the Office of Special Education for the state of Indiana's Department of Education. And that kind of like brought it all back around for me, how I loved working with people, different learners, and showing folks that kids could do it because I managed a lot of different grants for the state. What happened was I was driving a lot and I wanted to live in Bloomington again. I wanted to work in Bloomington again. And that led me to my first tech job. And I loved it. I never thought of myself as a very technical person. I literally cry real tears if you ask me to code. I will do it, but I will sob the entire time. And it's true. I sat at my desk at that company trying to code. We were working with NASA education, all this stuff. I'm weeping. I'm like, oh God, why is this happening to me? Um, you know, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm doing it and I can do it. Um, I don't like to do it, but I can. And I think that's really important. And I know this is really rambly. You will figure out Laura Raderman knows this. Like I just ramble and random stuff comes out, and then we'll find a theme at some point. Either that or you're gonna fall asleep. But you know, I think that's important here. We're gonna pause. I figured out I could do it. I want you guys all to know, like, there's a lot of crap in the background that you just heard about in the last like 6 minutes of this woman did like 8 different lifetimes, and there's stuff I didn't even talk about. But you can do it. Like if you try hard enough, there's a lot of stuff that you really can do. And I know that people say that all the time. They're like, you can do it. You can be anything you want to be. You really can. Um, you know, I just wanted to have something that I believed in. I was still young enough that I was like, I have to believe in absolutely everything that I do. I have to like get, you know, ethical and moral fulfillment out of everything that I do. And I still believe that, but not all the time. I have hobbies now. So, you know, doing that really taught me like, hey, I can do this. I managed a lot of stuff. I worked with NASA education. I worked with NSF. I did all this stuff and it was great. And it took me back to that academic piece that I kind of lost for a while. Loved it. But that company I worked for was the first spin-off company of Indiana University's Pervasive Technology Institute. So it was run by wonderful people who I love dearly. They could not manage a business very well. So we were going belly up. And I started panic applying for new jobs. And I was just like, I'm going to apply to everything. And what happened was I applied for a position at Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research. They needed a manager for education outreach and training. And I was like, cool, I can teach anybody anything. Just, you know, tell me what it is. I'm going to have to teach myself anyway because I don't understand any of the stuff that you guys are talking about. I can help other people. And what happened was they actually hired me. And that's how I started in cybersecurity. I needed a paycheck. This is another pause point. Sometimes you just need the paycheck, and that's okay. That's something that I tell people that I mentor all the time. Like, sometimes you just got to do it for the paycheck and the, you know, like the moral and ethical part. Like, it's really great if you can find all of it in one. But sometimes, girl, you just got to get paid, you know, like, and you can use that to leverage yourself to get into a different role that really matters to you or gets you to your end goal. But CACR for me was that. I didn't know it at the time. And it was a really difficult learning experience for me because I was so used to being good at stuff and being able to go in and learn stuff and pick it up and like be a superstar that that was really hard. Um, because cybersecurity can be really hard. And the one thing that I wish I would have known going in is that you can't know everything about cybersecurity. There are no experts. There are experts in parts of cybersecurity, absolutely, but there's no one expert on everything in cybersecurity. If you remember anything from this talk, remember that. If you are interested in the field and you're like, I want to try this, but I don't know where to start, start on what you're interested in. Start on something that just like jams with you and do that. There's just no like, I feel like a lot of people are like, I want to try cybersecurity. You can't try just all of it. Like, there are a lot of flavors. Um, Doing the one that, and sometimes you try that and you're like, oh, but really, like, I think I want to go this direction. Totally good. But remember, there's no experts. There's nobody that can do all of it. And at the time, I had a really hard time understanding that. It finally clicked with me after a little while that, like, no, like there's nobody in the center that can do all the things. Like they need all of us. We all need to work together for this. But it was a hard lesson to learn. It sucked. I'm glad I learned it now, 10 years later. But it was hard. It was painful. After that, I actually ended up getting sick and I didn't work for a couple of years because trying to like figure out all that stuff. Um, but while I was sick, I actually ran into the executive director of an organization called REN-ISAC, which is the Research Education Network's Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is also housed at IU. And they were actually in the same suite as CACR. So Kim Milford, who was the director at the time, she and I had desks, like my desk was right outside her office. And we had become friendly and stuff. And I ran into her at Target when I was not working and sick and on crutches because I couldn't walk unsupported, and I had my kids with me and they're like young and crazy. They're still crazy but not like they were then. um and she was like, let's start having coffee, and so I started having coffee with her. And you know 2 years later I'm working at REN-ISAC, and I never thought I'd go back to cybersecurity because I thought I sucked, and I was like, these people suck. um, but I'm glad I did. Like Kim and I meshed really well. And I went and I started working at Red, and I was their strategic partnerships manager. And what that meant was I was working with partners, corporate, other higher education associations, different schools, both domestic and internationally, and helping form different bridges with Red to help the cybersecurity community. So Red does all the higher ed, um, like schools and stuff like that. And they do like threat intel, and there's like a huge community. So it's kind of like Las Vegas for higher ed cybersecurity. Like people go there and you like whatever they talk about, it's everybody is like within that. Nobody talks about it outside of there. So I went from, my first job in cybersecurity where it was painful. There were some really good moments, and I really did learn so much. Like you can learn a lot from any experience you have. You just got to sit back and kind of reflect. To moving on to this where I was empowered. It was like, Amy, go. You do this, you take this, you know what you're doing. And it was fantastic. I don't want to take all the time. While I was there, I will tell you how I got to this job very quickly. I saw an email across my desk that they needed volunteers to help with this thing that the government was putting together called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And I was like, I need to boost my resume. I'm going to do this. So I signed up to help the training part of the organization that's overseeing everything just figure out who was going to be qualified to do this in the first place. It was like 2 meetings. I did it. The guy that was running it was like, who wants to come help write the exam? He was like, you can't be an assessor if you write the exam. And I was like, I'm not assessing crap. It's like, I don't want my name on that. So I was also like, there's nobody from higher ed involved in this. And also, all the documents you just showed me are awful and they need to be rewritten. So I volunteered to go with him on that. And he liked me, and everybody else liked me. And they were like, you know what you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, I do. So, which I would not have said 3 years earlier. I will tell you that 3 years earlier, I would have not said a word and I would have just quietly gone through the whole thing. The empowerment that was happening at Run ISAC was what I needed. And you're not always going to get that from other folks. Um, I was getting it externally, but I was also getting it internally. And life will do that to you too. That's kind of like a both external and internal thing is sometimes you have those moments where you sit down and you reflect and you're like, either I don't care anymore and I've got no F's left, let's just roll. Or somebody's going to be like, no, you really have got this. And you're going to take that and be like, I do have this. Anyway, so I kept working with him and I helped stand up this model that is now being used uh, broadly for the Department of Defense contractors. And they have to get certified to show that their cybersecurity, everything that's happening with them and their organization, they've got to show that they have maturity and they've got their ducks in a row and they're not like, selling their plans to China or, Russia or anything like that. So, working through that and, I've written curriculum. I helped stand up the first academic advisory council. I wrote the charter for that. I've made over 100 training videos for another organization. All that stemmed from working with him, which stemmed from being empowered, going back to run ISAC. I am really trying to go quickly so that other people have time to talk. So that is what led me to this job. I went from IU to University of Wisconsin, where I was the director of strategic security for the system and was basically the CISO for 3 campuses. Did that for a couple of years, but then this summer I got a phone call from the guys at Ascend Cyber, which we're going to go back to peak infosec. It's the mountain theme. It's okay. We're staying on brand. Um, and they're just like, hey, we just combined a couple of companies. We're doing training. Like, do you want to come be the VP of training services and run this for us? And I was like, hell yes, I do. Never thought I would leave higher ed ever. I've done CMMC on the side, and I'm talking nights and weekends. I've slept with books and different materials for almost 6 years for CMMC. It was always my side piece. I was like, I'm never going to do it. No, I'm not going to marry it, side piece it. We'll talk after midnight. So, but I love these guys and they are top notch. They know what they're talking about. They have morals and they're very kind. And the first thing they always say is, how can we help? Not how much are you going to pay me? So that fit in with my morals, which, see, you can hold on to the morals that the warm and fuzzy can stay there. You still can get paid. And sometimes you have to take those opportunities, but sometimes it does come full circle. Um, I feel like I just took you all on like a really weird Willy Wonka train ride of ramble. But that is my really random story of how I got here. And I will tell you that I never expected to end here. I thought I was going to be a doctor when I was little. And when I was 22, I thought that I was going to follow bands. And when I was 30, I don't even know what I was thinking when I was 30. I was thinking, like, I got babies and I'm tired. So at 45, who knows what's next? But I will tell you, you keep going. And, remember that it's always going to get better and sometimes it's going to suck, but there's always something to learn from it. Um, One last thing also, talk to other people too. Build out your circle. I have circles of folks that I lean on pretty hard. And when I was younger, I never wanted to do that. The older I've gotten, the more I realized having those people, that's what saved me. Um, and I love them. And they do the same with me too. Like I will literally talk to anybody about anything. If anybody needs anything, I'm there. Um, you know, I think that's how we all make it now. You just, post COVID, whatever we're doing now, reaching out to one another, do it. Use your people. I will let Laura talk now, and I'm going to drink some water because I have now rambled enough that I need to do that.
No, thank you, Amy, so much. I think it's super encouraging to hear kind of like your path through things, and it wasn't the standard. Yeah, I just reached out to people on LinkedIn, right? You're like building those personal connections and how you've kind of gone through your career pathway. Um, Yeah, very different, I think, than a lot of the standard cybersecurity. So that's super exciting too from others who may not be, in that specific track but are interested, right? So then it's kind of different viewpoints of how to get there, especially as a woman too.
For sure.
Um, yeah. But yeah, go ahead, Laura. You have the floor.
I do have a few slides, but they're not a whole lot. Just a little bit about me. I did take the more straight path to cybersecurity. I have been in 25 years in cybersecurity, all parts of it. So as Amy said, you really can't be an expert in everything. You have to lose something to gain something else as far as the knowledge goes. I have been a lead assessor as Amy was talking about for the Cyber AB for since December when they first announced it. What I do at Carnegie Mellon, any law regulation that applies to information security, I have my fingers in it somehow. Um, I'm also on the leadership team for the Regulated Research Community of Practice. So this is a group of all higher eds. We talk to each other and say, "Hey, how are you doing this? How are you putting antivirus on a HPC? How are you handling this?" As Amy said, as you get older, you get more hobbies. I have a Girl Scout leader, cookie wrangler. I dabble in home automation. I don't program or code anymore in my day job, but I code to program my house, and it drives my husband bonkers. Um, but I like to swim, and I'm married, and I have a high schooler now. I started very early. Amy and I are similar age. This is a picture of me in my dad's lap with my very first computer. I was probably about 3, maybe 4, somewhere in that ballpark. Um, and my dad was an accountant. He always had computers because he needed the computers to do the accounting pieces. So we always had computers growing up at our house. We actually lived down the street from a Commodore factory at one point, and we were one of the first families to have a Commodore 64 in our house. So I have been in computers my whole life. Um, Unfortunately, I went to one of the poorest school districts in the state of Texas, and we didn't have computers in our high school. This is before computers were everywhere, right? You might have had them in a high school or in a college computer lab, but very rarely in high school. Not even most people had them at home. The good thing is that we lived very close to the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. It was called Pan Am at the time, and they had a pre-engineering program. It was for all engineering, not just computers, but they had computer classes. So I really took advantage of that. And we got introduced to higher math, programming, logic, machining, and for machine controllers and things like that. It was a really cool program that really tried to encourage minorities to get into engineering. Um, so I did. Uh, I went to for my the first time I went to school. I went to Texas A&M. I got my bachelor's of science in computer science. I actually started in electrical engineering and computer engineering, but at the time, if you were in any of the engineering disciplines, you had to take thermodynamics. Which, if any of you have gone through engineering, it's a lot of math and a lot of science that I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. So I switched to a bachelor of science in computer science with a minor in electrical engineering. So I got to do computer engineering without doing thermodynamics, which I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can do this. Later on, I did actually take a thermodynamics course through Coursera. And it's like, oh, this isn't so bad. But, at the time, I was like, I don't want to take thermo. Everybody says don't take thermo if you don't have to. But, and I went straight from A&M to Carnegie Mellon as a grad school. There's a little stuff going on. I had some jobs in there, but it's for the university while I was a student. But I went for a Master of Science in Information Networking. Carnegie Mellon is a huge interdisciplinary school. Everything is across disciplines. So information networking is a combination of computer science, electrical engineering, and business classes. So it's a 1.5 year program. It still exists. At the time, security was not a degree option. Like there was no classes or degree or anything with cybersecurity. If you went into security, you were in engineering, computer science. A lot of electrical engineering too, actually. Now the Information Networking Institute, which I graduated from, does have a Master's of Science in Information Security, but at the time it didn't. So I graduated from that. Um, and kind of like mine, as Amy said, I've got pretty much that straight-ish path. My first job was at a help desk. I was a help desk for the Fortran lab at Texas A&M for other engineers. I knew how to program Fortran. I could help people code as well as fix the computer and printer. It's usually the printer that broke. But after that, I started working full-time for the university as a Linux system administrator. And it was for a department, for a math department, but it was a full-time position. So I got staff perks, which in Texas at the time, we could get a stipend towards books. So I could get $400 of books per semester, like basically on my business. And I could take 2 classes for free every semester. My dad, who was paying for college, loved this, right? Because all of a sudden now I'm paying for college instead of him, as well as the books. So he really had to help me with he still helped with room and board, but I could have, it was a full-time job. I was getting paid a full-time salary. So I was able to do that. Then I graduated. And like I said, I kind of went straight from A&M to Carnegie Mellon. In grad school, I was also Linux system administrator as part of a student stipend. So the program I was in, the information networking at the time, was really trying to get more American students in the group. And so my class had 15 people, which was the smallest class that has ever gone through the Information Networking Institute. And we had half of us were American students. Well, they also gave all the American students a full scholarship for tuition and a stipend every month. And then I had to work 10 hours a week being a Linux system administrator. I'm like, oh, okay, this is fine. I can do this. I did this before, I'd do it again. But at the time, again, security is not a thing at the time. You just, nobody cares. Everything's on the internet, right? As I was being a system administrator, I'm starting to see all these scans and attacks and things going on my computers. It's like, what the heck's going on? And so I'm starting to figure out, oh, wait, I should probably do this. And at the time, and up until literally last year, Carnegie Mellon has public IP space. So my laptop sitting on our wireless network was a public IP, which means you're out in the open. Your butt's hanging in the wind there on the internet. So we were getting a lot of attacks. And of course, Carnegie Mellon is we've always been well known for our School of Computer Science. It's like, hey, I hacked CMU, let me try. So we were getting a lot of attacks. And that's where my interest started to get into the security. At first I thought, I'm going to be a great sysadmin. I love fixing the computers. I love taking care of the computers. I really don't like people. So that was great as a system administrator because I could make the computer do things. But once I got into security, again, who you know is more important than what you know. One of my colleagues that I graduated with had started working for a consulting company that did penetration testing. And being a sysadmin and security it's 2 sides of the same coin, right? Like you're protecting versus attacking. And so I was like, oh, I can do penetration testing. So my specialty was Linux, of course. But because of my computer science background, I had done a lot of coding. So I could do secure code review as well, which there's really not that many people who understand security and development. And I said that as my husband is a software developer and he sucks at security. So there's not too many people that get both of them. The problem with that was I was traveling all the time. Every Sunday I was flying out somewhere. Every Friday night or Saturday I was flying home just to fly back out on Sunday. And I wasn't married at the time, wasn't even dating, no kids, right? So I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. But then it's like, well, I'm tired of this. I want to spend time at home. I want hobbies. I want to do things. So I started looking around and I took a job. The actual title of the job, description was ethical hacker. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I had actually been looking for jobs for somebody I was dating at the time, and he was not interested in security. He was a developer, but I was like, oh, I'm going to apply for this. I went to talk to the company. It was a startup out of George Mason. So they were out of the George Mason incubator down in the Virginia. And they did consulting, security consulting. Their primary focus was public key infrastructure, which is one very small part of security. I could bring to the program the penetration testing and the code development and things like that. But most of our customers were pharmaceutical companies and financial industry customers, which, as some of you might know, are highly regulated industries. They have to follow so many rules, so many regulations, and a lot of them happen to be on information security. So I started learning HIPAA. I started learning SOX. I started learning all of these rules and regulations. And it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. So our consulting started to move more towards the regulations. I became the director of security assessments at that company. At our biggest, we were 13 people, so not a very big company, but and so I became the director. We did security assessments. We would do third-party assessments. We would do software development, like code assessments. We would do, as part of penetration testing, that's part of an assessment. We take a look, how are you meeting these laws? So I learned a lot about the laws and regulations. I learned a lot about running companies, like how do you create estimates, like how much is this going to take? What should I charge? That kind of thing. Unfortunately, that company was bought out in 2014, and the new company really just wanted the CEO of the company at the time. So the rest of us were kind of like, yeah, okay, we're along for the ride, but we don't like this here. So I started looking around. And at the time I was living in the DC area. I was living in Northern Virginia. And Carnegie Mellon, I was like, okay, I'm looking. Oh, Carnegie Mellon wants this position for policy and compliance and third-party risk assessments and assessments. I'm like, I can do this. And so I applied. I actually have family in the Pittsburgh area. So, over the last 25 years, I've driven between Pittsburgh and DC way too many times to count. But so I came back to Pittsburgh and worked at Carnegie Mellon. And I've been here since 2014. You can kind of see I tend to stay at jobs a long time. And I will freely admit it's because I'm lazy. It's hard work to find a new job. It's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things that you might not you might not see. But while I've been here at the university, along with Amy and the Cyber AB, a lot of other universities are like, hey, you know what you're talking about? Can you help us? So I started a side consulting business, formally became an LLC this year. And so I work two jobs really for myself and for the university. And I'm enjoying it. I'm not into the technical. Like if you ask me to do a penetration test for somebody, I'd be like, no, you need to go talk to somebody else. That's not my skill set anymore. But that background information is useful when one of our engineers says, hey, there's this vulnerability. Okay, explain this to me. What is this vulnerability doing? Why is it a problem for us? And they can go tech speak and I understand what's going on. And then I usually translate it to business speak for them. So I consider myself like a bit of a bridge to between the technical and the business side. I went back to school again, and this is while I was in DC. I was technically a Maryland resident at the time, so I went to the University of Maryland Global Campus. This was an online school before online school was a thing. It was actually designed for service members and their families. So it was completely asynchronous. It was great. I ended up getting another master's of science, this time in technology management. So it's more of a, how do I bring a new technology product to market? What do I need to do? How do I like forecast the strategy, that type of thing? And for 3 extra classes, I could get an MBA. Like, yeah, why not? So I did it for 3 extra classes. I actually ended up focusing in project management in the MBA classes, which has really helped serve me well throughout my career, because everybody needs projects, right? But as I've gotten older, I have more and more hobbies. You'll see my family. That's actually my daughter became a senior Girl Scout this year. So this is her bridging ceremony when she like went up. She and I dance at the same dance studio. So this is a picture from our last recital where we were dancing together. The theme was a vacation. So we were supposed to wear summer clothes to do the opening number. But if you've ever tried to change your tights when you're sweaty, it doesn't work. So all of us adults who we had a black dress later, we're all wearing black tights. So that's why I look funny in the black tights. But I have my cats. The other picture is a Girl Scout cookies. My girls love to sell cookies, and they are business monsters. They will sit there and do a lot. Um, Home automation. I love Home Assistant. I will sit there and program my house. As I said, my husband, he drives him nuts because things break. And when things break in code, usually it's like, okay, yeah, I just don't run that code. When things break on your house, you start to piss off people, especially like when the lights turn on at 5 o'clock in the morning because you forgot that you didn't have work that day and forgot to change the time. Um, and then I swim. I really enjoy swimming. I swam when I was really little, like 6, 7, 8, and then not again. My daughter picked up swimming a couple of years ago on a summer USA swimming team. She's not swimming anymore. I still am. So that's my dance and swimming is my exercise. Uh, Amy kind of like sprinkled her lessons learned in, and I just kind of had them all together. It's like, and I'll echo Amy, do what you want. It might be hard and uncomfortable, and you might be like, oh, crap, I don't like this. But if it's something that you want, you'll get through that hard time. You'll push through those bad things to get to the good things. But do what you want, right? Like it might be hard, it might be uncomfortable. When I was younger, um, I might have been the only girl in an entire class in the engineering department. And you're sitting there like, oh wait, am I going to get mugged when I try to leave class here? How many times am I going to get hit on when I try to leave class? Um, but it was something I wanted to do. So do it. Take advantage of opportunities to try new things. Don't like, oh, man, that seems cool. Let me try it. You might find that you don't like it. You might find that you love it, but you won't know until you try it. So take advantage of those opportunities. You are the only person in charge of your career. Nobody is going to tell you you need to leave this job and go to the next one. Nobody's going to tell you, hey, maybe this is a toxic workplace and you should leave. Nobody's going to tell you what you should do next. So it is your path, your desire. You have to pay attention. You might have a mentor like Amy that says, hey, girl, you got to get out of there. This is not doing good for you. But it's still your choice. You're still responsible for that. Sometimes you want to deal with people and sometimes you don't. And in cybersecurity, what's great is there are careers for both kinds of people. If you don't want to deal with people, you are perfectly happy to be in a security operations center, looking at logs, dealing with computers, and you might never have to talk to a person maybe once a week, right? Talk to your boss. And then there's more careers like the consulting and the teaching where you have to talk to people. And there's a wide range between. So kind of know yourself. Like, are you a people person or are you not a people person? And pick your career based on that, because if you're not a people person, you will never be happy in a position that you have to deal with a lot of people. You will just be miserable. And if you are a person who loves to deal with people and loves to talk, loves to socialize, you will never be happy stuck in the corner coding. So consider your personality when you're looking at careers and what you want to do next. Things that have taken me a long time to learn. No is a complete sentence. You can just say no. You don't have to give a reason. You don't have to say why. You can just say no, thank you. Kind of related to that, volunteering is rewarding. I love volunteering with the Girl Scouts. I love seeing the girls grow and change. I've been with the same group of girls since they were 5 years old. And it's been really gratifying to see them change and become young women and become, what they're going to be in their potential. It's rewarding, but at the same time, you have to say no, because if you're willing to do the volunteering, people will think you will keep volunteering and keep adding things to your plate. So it's a really good to learn. I'm full, no thank you. And don't forget to move your body. Especially cybersecurity computers, we sit at computers all day. I cannot say that I'm great at it, but I do it. And do something you enjoy. it does not have to be lift weights. It does not have to go for a run. It does not have to be swimming. Just move your body in whatever way makes you happy. And it's really important to keep that, because the older you get, you start to lose your capability to move. And yeah, keep moving, even if standing desk, even it's up to you, whatever your desires are. And that is all the background lessons learned I had to add for Amy.
No, thank you so much. I love all the tips and tricks and the different perspectives on, what's important. And it's always good to hear, um, yeah, just women in the field and how they've like progressed to where they are today. Make sure you guys also read the comments in the chat. I wasn't going to say them out loud, but there's a lot of comments and things like that are very encouraging. Definitely, we all appreciate you guys talking. Um, so I have a few questions, but I'll probably open the floor first to anyone if they want to unmute themselves or ask in the chat. Um, yeah, pretty much anything you can ask. You can just make a comment if you'd like. Um, but Well, okay, if nobody's gonna right now, you guys can go ahead and keep thinking about them. I kind of had a first question that was related. You both like talked about like, okay, like I didn't know any of this, so I had to go learn it, right? And then you like it's a continuous learning process, right? So kind of like my question is like there's so many different like certificates out there. There's like, is it MBA helpful? Is it not? So I don't know if you guys could like shed some light on terms of like what you see kind of like that's lacking in the industry right now, where it could be like, okay, these are ways that you could put your like put us forward into the field. I know it's kind of a broad question, but it's either for either of you guys if you have an answer.
No, I think the certificates are useful to get your foot in the door. A lot of them don't necessarily have a great meaning once I have a CISSP. I've had a CISSP since 2003. The only reason I keep it up is because I consult and people expect to see those letters behind my name. Um, and if you're ever working for the government, in Virginia, you probably have a lot of government jobs that it's important to them. So really, for me, I've taken a lot of classes that if I wanted to, I could take the exam and get this cert, but you don't have to. So I definitely tell people, look for what you're interested in. I do think that there is a lack of technology to business translators, for lack of a better word. That the people who understand enough of the technology to be able to explain to the business owners why they should care. Because computer people are like, oh, this has a vulnerability. It's like, okay, and what, so being able to be that kind of like translator, it's lacking in the cybersecurity field, I think.
And you can have too many certificates too. So, there are people, call them paper pirates, that just keep getting them and amassing them. And then you'll look at them and people are like, what do you actually know? Like, what have you done? So that's another consideration just to keep in mind. Like, I mean, I've always felt very rewarded by like academics and, like continuing my education and things like that. I tried to go back and get my PhD a couple of times and I was like, this is not going to happen with two children. Um, I have a certificate from the law school at IU that was around cybersecurity stuff, cyber risk management, but well, it's cybersecurity law and policy. That helped a lot. I sobbed the entire semester that I had to do this boot camp where there were technical things and the person that had taken over teaching the class like completely messed everything up. But like tempering it and making sure that, like Laura said, like kind of looking and seeing where whatever you're taking fits. And she's absolutely right. Like being able to translate the tech to the business is huge, or the tech to like just lay people, because not everybody gets it. And that's very valuable. being able to communicate it through your organization outside of your organization is extremely useful. Just, being able to know the things. Another, just to add this little nugget of advice, one thing that I was told during my first cybersecurity job was use Google. If you think the people in the other cubicles aren't using Google, you're wrong. It's okay. Look it up. Nobody's going to be mad at you or judge you for, well, they might because people can be judgmental, but screw them. Um, just look it up. It's okay. Make sure, like it's okay to look it up. Look it up. That's how you're going to
Okay to talk to
learn.
people.
Yeah, just look it up. That's life. That's what we all do. That's the secret from an old lady. I look stuff up all the time. Like I like even if I think I know sometimes I'll look it up just to make sure. So
I had a question that was kind of a generic one you would expect to get asked, but kind of if you guys, because you've worked through like the development of AI and everything, and if that's changed what you guys do at all and helped or hurt.
I love it. I used to hate it. I was really anti-AI, and I do have a lot of concerns about personal privacy and organizational privacy, and I would not ever put in anything sensitive ever. Um, Still, like there's a big rule in this household about utilizing anything around AI. And actually, my children are both so scared that at 14 and 16, they still won't use anything that's AI, which I feel like that's a win a little bit, except for now I'm like, just use it. It's a tool. And they're like, no, mom, you told us it was bad. So, but I have found that it's extremely helpful. Like when I'm writing, um, just to like get thoughts, you know, kind of organized or to help with it. So I have found that, especially like before I left higher ed, more folks were starting to openly adopt and accept that it was a tool that we need to use and get used to using and ensure that students are using it properly. When even a year ago, everybody was like, no, like at least where I was, where it was a little more conservative, like folks were like, mm-mm. But yeah, so I'll let Laura answer now and stop rambling.
Yeah, no, but so at CMU at work, we're some of the forefathers of AI from the 60s, right? And it's a huge push to use AI in everything. Unfortunately, I am not a big fan of AI. As I said, my husband's a software developer. He can develop that kind of thing. And, for me, it's really just the stochastic parrot. And I find out that I can actually type and write faster myself with my thoughts than I can get AI, than I can figure out a prompt to get AI to write for me. And for everything else I do, I am dealing with such sensitive information. I can't go to AI. And so, for me, I don't really use it that much. Probably the only thing I've used it for is to write a project plan. But that's how I use it, and that's mostly because of the type of information I deal with.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's actually refreshing, and that your kids don't use it too. I honestly I like hearing that because I feel like a lot of learning is not
It's
happening anymore.
prohibited. It's
Yeah.
prohibited in our school. Like
Okay.
my daughter just started high school this year, and every single teacher is like, if we catch you using AI, we're going to call
Yeah,
that plagiarism.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
Well,
that's
and I mentioned this earlier, and I think it was before like folks started to join. My kids actually do virtual school. They're not allowed. They occasionally are allowed to use it, and they have had like my junior in high school had an assignment with English earlier this year where they were told to use AI, but typically they are not allowed to use AI either. But when they come to me for help, I'm like, I don't have time. Like for some of this, especially math, I am not a math person. I stopped with the third grade math. It's like they're not teaching it the way they did in the dark ages. I don't know what's happening. So I have a couple of apps on my phone that are AI, and I will scan and just use that to like teach them stuff. But yeah, both of them, they get it from their teachers. They're not allowed to use it. One of them calls it IA, which I think is adorable. But yeah, they're just it's a no. And to respond to that comment about virtual school that being good for some students and not being discussed enough. I could totally go on a really long tangent on that one, but yeah, it's definitely my younger kiddo has asthma that's pretty bad. And she kept flaring at her in-person school last year. So that's why we made the move. My older kiddo, um, same situation, but also it just was not a good fit in person. I think, we got to talk about mental health a little bit more openly still in the country, but it's been a great move for both of my kids, and we're getting close to time. So
Mine's the opposite. Mine had to go back to school. She was not, she could learn a virtual, but she was getting miserable. And, at the age range she was like during COVID, she just needed to be in the social
yeah,
activities. And, so she's really done well in in-person school. And I think she needs that, but that's her.
yeah,
I did my master's and MBA online and did fine. So I think really depends on the kid or the person who's learning.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Elle's involved in like a ton of clubs as a, captain for esports and all that stuff. And, it really does. I think the high school that we chose to was not the right fit. So, you know, you gotta be flexible.
No, I really appreciate your guys' comments and advice. We still have about 5 more minutes. I don't know if anybody else had any other questions or just comments. There were a lot of
Yeah.
comments written in the chat.
I do have one question for you guys, which would be how has your experience been in a male-dominated field? I know it's probably changed over the last couple decades, but I just wanted to kind of get your perspective. I know we only have a couple minutes, but
Amy, do you want to go first?
I can. So, I had never been the only woman on a team until my prior job. When I was at Ren Isaac, it was a very female heavy team. Um, and it was really weird moving to that. I'd like I had no frame of reference because I had always worked in pretty split, organizations or like with Ren, a lot of women. So, it's weird. Um, Sometimes it was great, and then, it can just be weird. Um, God, I'm trying to be really diplomatic here. I think sometimes it just, there's different thinking for everybody, no matter what their gender. And occasionally folks will slip back into old gender roles, even though they're equal with their peers. They still will see that peer and think like, well, why don't you take notes? And can you get to that slide again? And things like that. Or they'll talk to a woman a little bit differently because it's a woman. And it was the same with the CMMC stuff at first. Like the guys were really terrified they're not terrified, but they didn't want to cuss in front of me. Which for a lot of military guys, that's like really funny. And I remember being on a meeting once and somebody said like asshole or something. And then was like, "Oh, ma'am, I'm sorry." And the other guys knew me and they started laughing. They're like, "Don't worry about her," because the F word is my favorite. So it's stuff like that where like there are like still in 2025, um, those gender like old gender norms still come out uh, and it can be uncomfortable and it can be weird. I am to the point where I'm very comfortable saying something. Um, and I will, and I'll be like, "I'm not your secretary. You can pull that up. Why don't you do this?" And in that one, I probably cussed at the guy and just made him laugh. But it's stuff like that where it's still happening. I don't know what will make it stop happening, but it is. Laura, what do you have
Yeah.
to say?
Well, and I think, I don't know how many of you have learned about the hidden labor of relationships and the hidden labor of work. Just because I don't know, relationship information, but even in with a workplace, women tend to get that hidden labor. It's like, oh, why don't you go buy a gift card for so and so's retirement? Why don't you put together the party? Why don't you, do all that thinking that's required? And, being able to say, "Hey, look, not my job. We have a secretary, we have an admin assistant. Let's ask them. That's their job." And so, that being able to stick up for yourself, and like I said, no, there is a complete sentence, and learning when, and as women, like, we were just socially conditioned to accept that kind of work as well. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
because your mom always did it, your grandma always did it, so that's what you've seen growing up. And so it's really hard to kind of turn that off and put your foot down and say, no, I'm not doing that.
And it can be really hard and it can be really uncomfortable. And especially if you are just starting out, like it can be really hard and uncomfortable. So, what we're not telling you like just to go, guns blazing in your first professional job and tell them no, but there's empathy here. It can be hard, but it is important to say no. And Laura's right, no is a complete sentence. Just tell people no.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really like hearing all that because it's like I'm also in my first professional job, so it's kind of like playing that role of like when do you step up to your male bosses or like think coworkers. But I think we're at our end. I really appreciate meeting you both and you guys taking the time and everyone else who was here. I know the call kind of was dropping as it was going, but people have busy lives. Um, but yeah, thank you so much. I don't know really what else to say other than we really appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
and
really
if anybody has questions, you guys have our emails, and we're happy to talk and be mentors. And
Yep, absolutely. And, link with us on LinkedIn too. It's one great lesson that I got from a former CIO was if you meet somebody, add them to LinkedIn immediately. That's your virtual Rolodex. Which I don't know if you guys know what Rolodexes are. They used to be these amazing little things that held business cards and information. Um, but you're probably like, we're not done. But add us to LinkedIn and please do reach out. Both of us really like working with people and mentoring. We're here to answer questions to help however we can.
Thank you.